Okay, so cookies. That's a brief intro of what cookies are. And everyone should have a basic understanding of cookies and what happens when you click the accept button. Kind of have to understand kind of what's going on in the background and what data sites are tracking about you. But for this class, how are we going to use cookies? So let me close all of these Python windows. And now we're going to do a cookies thing. So let's make a new file. Let's save this file, which of course it doesn't remember anything. So I'm just going to throw my desktop. I'll put the one in there in our folder later. So cookies.py. So now I have cookies. Oops. Let's just start with this code here, because that's actually cookie code. So we'll start with this here, and we're going to write basically some functions that take a look at cookies. And we don't need the print statement, I just need the cookies. We basically have two cookies here, ucsd.edu, one website, and python-news.com, another website, and each cookie has different information about it. And we're going to create a library to use these cookies. Previously, we gave you a library called the CSE8A image library. And now we're going to look at creating a cookie library that we could give to other people so that they can manage cookies in their own programs. And when we need the option to set the cookies for a particular site, and then we need to be able to get those values of those cookies from a particular site. It's a good idea to usually start with set. So we're going to write a method called setCookie, which basically means I'm going to add a cookie, a new cookie, whatever it is, to a site. And I need to pass in a dictionary of cookies, which is what this is up here. This is a dictionary of cookies. It just currently has two cookies in it. Actually, it has three cookies. It just has two different sites, but it has three different cookies. So when we're looking up a cookie, we look up by a site name. So ucsd.edu or python-news.com. And so we need the cookies dictionary, we need the site name, and then we need the name of the cookie. So PWD is the name of the cookie. Font pref is the name of the cookie. Session is the name of the cookie. And then the last thing we need, so we can set a cookie value for a particular site, is we actually need the value. And that's going to be the value of the cookie. So ABC, Courier, or XGKE. Those are the values. So here's our function definition. And now we need to figure out how to save a cookie into a dictionary. Well, it's a dictionary of dictionaries. So let's first get the dictionary out of the main dictionary. So cookies is a dictionary, but I want the dictionary for a particular site. So if I pass in UCSD, this is going to give me that dictionary, which is the password ABC part of it. And then I'm just going to add a new value for a particular key. And remember, in a dictionary, right? If this is already present in this site cookies dictionary, if it's already there, it's just going to replace the value. Just going to update it. For example, if it's the password, it'll give us it'll actually put in a new password. If it's a new cookie, it'll just add a new cookie. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So first, let's take a look at cookies. So there's our cookies dictionary. We just wrote set cookie. Pretty sure it's called set cookie. And we need to pass in the dictionary, cookies. Let's pass in ucsd.edu. Let's update the password. Actually, instead of updating the password, let's add something new. Let's add a username. Let's say my username at UCSD is Greg. It's actually not my username, but let's say it is. I want to add this new cookie to the UCSD site. And so if we print out cookies, you'll see that it added my name as a username to the UCSD site. Now, you should never set your passwords to ABC. So let's do set cookies. Again, ucsd.edu. Let's change the password. And let's pick a new password. Let's go another password we should never use, 123. Let's try that password. And if we look at the cookies, you'll see the password went from ABC to 123. So it works for adding new cookies to a dictionary. And it also works for updating the value of a cookie in a dictionary. What's going to happen though if I try to set a cookie to something to a site that doesn't exist? And let's add, I'm out of names. I'll volunteer another instructor. So I want to add Joe to facebook.com cookie for his user ID. I want to add his user ID. What's going to happen when I try to set this cookie? Think about this code for a second. What's going to happen when I try to set this cookie? I get a key error. We don't have facebook.com in here. So this site does not exist. And what happens when you look up a key that doesn't exist? Python complains and tells you that you have a key error. Remember, you cannot access a key that doesn't exist. And we shouldn't have our program crash. We should handle this in a much better way. Our program should never crash. And so to handle this in a better way, right now, we're making the assumption the site exists, right? But we need to handle the case where it doesn't exist. And so we can actually look inside the site to see if it's inside the cookies. And we can do a couple of different things here, but we're setting a cookie. So it makes sense for us just to add an empty dictionary for that cookie. That's just one way to do this. There's other ways. It'll still run these bottom two lines of code here, except now this is just going to return the empty dictionary. And then it'll add the new key to the site's dictionary. So each site has its own dictionary, but the fb.com site didn't exist. This will actually add it with the particular site names in the empty dictionary. And then it'll add the username. And we run this again. And by the way, our cookies reverted back to the original because at the top here, we're constantly resetting cookies. So all the changes I made to cookies are gone. So we're back to the original. And now we can do set cookie. In fact, let me actually just go look for the previous line. This is the line that crashed previously. Now we ran it and there's no error. And now we have a new site, fb.com, with its own dictionary, which has a single element, user ID, with the value of Joe. We should still check if the previous stuff works just to make sure that we didn't change anything. So the password now went from ABC to 123, just so we know other stuff still works. We could also have done it with set. Now that we know Facebook is in there, we can do another fb.com. We can actually do a password as well for that. And it still works. So now we have user ID of Joe, password 123. So we can now set the value of a cookie in our dictionary. So anytime we have a new cookie, we just add a new cookie. Or anytime we want to update a cookie, we just call this function to update the cookie. So now that we've set a cookie, we need the ability to get a particular cookie. So it should look pretty similar. Let's see, get cookie. It's going to take cookies, site, and a name. We don't need to set a value, right? Because the value is actually set up here. We want to return the value. So we just want to look in the dictionary for this site. So we look for this site in cookies. And then for that dictionary, we look up the name and just return the value. So it's going to look similar. In fact, we can just use this line here. The first thing we want to do is we want to get the site out of the cookies dictionary. And then we're just going to return the value for that particular name. And so for UCSD and password, we would pass in this cookies, site name ucsd.edu, name would be pwd. This would grab this dictionary here, set it to site cookies, and then it would look up the value of pwd and it would return ABC. And for pythonnews.com, that would be the site name, which would go into site cookies, this dictionary here. And then we would look up the name, maybe session, and return this value here. Back to our original cookies. And now we should be able to get cookie, pass in cookies. And what do we say? pythonnews.com, the font pref. And that returned courier, which is the font pref for pythonnews.com site. Now, are we done with cookies? Or do we need to do something else with cookies? So type in chat if you think cookies is good. Or if you think cookies is not complete and we need to run more tests to check, type in chat what you think we need to do to see what happens, what else we need to do. So just go ahead and type in chat. Is it correct or do we need to do some more work? And if we need to do more work, what? What do we need to do? No one has an idea? What's missing? Yeah, well, we're going to use the get method. Well, we're going to use get cookie. I don't know what get method you're referring to, but what's wrong with it? Is there something wrong with it or is it fine? Ah, there you go. Yeah. What happens if the site doesn't exist? If we try to get a cookie, remember there's no Facebook in here, right? Or let's actually just use this one here. What if I try to get, maybe we mistyped it, instead of saying Python news, we said Python org, and we asked for the font pref. Well, that cookie python.org doesn't exist. It's the same problem that we had here. If the site doesn't exist, we have a problem. Well, now we have another issue here, though. What do we do about it? If the site's not in the cookie dictionary, what are we going to do here? We could return something, and what should we return? Well, we could put in some sort of error message. This is certainly one way of handling it. And so now when we try to get it, we get an error message, which is better than actually breaking. So are we done or is there more to do? So type, are we still done? Are we done now? Did we get it? Do we catch all the problems or is there another problem in here? What do you think? In chat, is there another issue in here? Or are we done? The website can't be in there twice because of a dictionary only has unique keys. And we're just trying to do get cookie. We have one done. Anybody see one more problem? There actually is a problem in here. Anybody see it? Yeah, what if the name isn't in the site? We said the site wasn't there, but what if the site is there, but the name isn't? What if we, instead of saying font pref, we said font? There's no font in there. So we actually have the same problem, except now the problem is that the name isn't there. So we actually should check to see if the name is not in the site before we do something. And we can do another return in here. So the name we're looking for isn't in this dictionary. So cookie name not found in sites. And so now if we don't find it, instead of crashing, it just tells us that the cookie name font not found in site pythonnews.com. And so basically we have these two situations. And now we've handled both conditions. The first one, we said if the site doesn't exist in the cookies dictionary, then we should stop because we'll crash if we don't. We just return an error. If the site is in there, then we get the dictionary for the site. But then we look to see if the name is in that site as a key. And if it's not, then we return another error. But if it is in there, then we just return the value for that particular name. So there's a couple of things we can do there. And now the code will not crash on us. But there's another way we could have handled this. This is just one way. Another way we could have handled this, though, a different version of this, is that sometimes instead of returning errors, maybe we want to return a default value instead. So we pass in some default value to use whenever something goes wrong. And that default value could just be another type of error message, but this time defined by the user. Or it could be an actual default value saying, you know, if it doesn't exist, then just use this thing. The caller can actually then use this information however they want. But this is just another way of doing it. In fact, I know cookies actually do this. So now if we say get cookie, instead of it crashing, we could say, I don't know, error. And now it returns error. Or we could say no value. Or we could say, in fact, it doesn't have to be a string. It could be an integer, -1. Or it could be a legitimate value. So maybe if the font isn't found, we just default to Courier. Or maybe we default to Arial. So we can use that default value as a way of letting the user decide what kind of errors they want to see or how they want to handle that error condition. And so now we have a library of cookies. And inside here, we have some keys. And we have some values. Right? And that's the way this thing works. We have some keys and values, and we have, say, a site, and then it has a dictionary. It's mapped to a dictionary that has some name, oops, finish the quotes, colon, some value, so value 1, right? That's completely possible. And then we could have a second site, just going to call that S2, mapped to a different dictionary, which could have completely different keys into the V2 and N3, oops, that should be a colon, to V3. It's unfortunate that my curly braces look the same as the number 3. So this is the structure that we currently have, right? We have UCSD, and then it has the password as a name, and then we have python-news.com, and then it had a couple of keys as well. So this is the one we have. But as library writers, we have the freedom to change our implementation to whatever we want. And we could, for the same library, maybe you want to do a different implementation for these keys and values and for this type of cookie. So in the second implementation, I want to do a second implementation of cookies. We'll call it version 2. Maybe we have a better way of storing cookies instead of using a dictionary of dictionaries. And for this one, instead of having the name as the keys and the values to be in the dictionary, what if instead we did it as a tuple? Site1 : name. And then that tuple will map to the value of 1. And we could write for S2 and N2 will map to V2, which apparently I forgot my quotes. That's supposed to be V2 with some quotes. Of course, we're not done yet. We have to do the third one. S2, N3 would map to V3. That's another way we could have done this, using a tuple as a key. And each one's going to be unique because you can only have N2 in here one time for S2. And so S2, N2 is still going to be unique, right? It's just another implement of the same thing. The key is still unique, except now it's a tuple with the site name and the name of the cookie. And that tuple ends up also being unique. So within the same site, we can have multiple things of the same name. We cannot have multiple things of the same name, which we knew beforehand. So I want to do this other version. Call this cookies version 2. And I'm just going to start with these two things. But I need to rewrite the dictionary. This isn't the way the dictionary is going to work now. The first item in this dictionary is now going to be a tuple with the site and the password, and then the value there. And it's not going to be inside of a dictionary. So that's the first item in this dictionary. The second item in this dictionary is going to be, hold on a second. Because there's two keys, we need another tuple. But there's two keys in the second dictionary. The first one is just going to be font pref to courier. And then we're going to have another tuple, not with that one, but with session. That looks right. So now we have this dictionary. Obviously, this isn't going to work with our code anymore, but it's the same dictionary where we have ucc.edu with the password for ABC, and then we have, do I have a, no, the closing bracket, oh, of the tuple, yeah, thank you. I was missing the tuple. So now we have 3 tuples as keys and 3 different values, but we don't have dictionaries within dictionaries. So We can see the advantages and disadvantages of doing this in two different ways. And if we change this from the user perspective, which are those who use our library, we shouldn't change how the functions look. So the parameters should stay the same. We shouldn't change anything about it, but we need to change how it works internally, but we keep the same input parameters. And then we're just going to change the code and how it works inside. So we leave the functions alone, at least the parameters, and so the user of our program isn't going to use it any differently. Well, now we're not going to check for site in the cookies. We're going to check for site in name, not in cookies. However, we're not going to then set that to an empty dictionary. In fact, we're not even going to be using a dictionary anymore. Right? If it's not there, we're just going to add it in there. We no longer need to retrieve a dictionary. And in fact, if you think about what we have to do here, we're just going to set this line here down here. If we don't find it, we add it. And if we do find it, we update it. It's literally the same code. And so we actually don't need this in here twice. Now that we've paired them together and there's no internal dictionary, we can get this, if we don't find it, we're just going to set it. And if we do find it, we're just going to update it directly. So we don't even need to worry about the case where the site name are not in the dictionary. We're just going to create it. And so we've actually simplified the code here by using this other structure. And so now it's a single line. And if we run this, and now let's look at our cookies. And we set, in fact, set cookie should still work the same. And there it is. fb.com user ID is now a tuple with the name Joe. So it still works exactly the same. We get the same results, and we used a different dictionary type, but we use the same method name to call it. So now, though, our values are not dictionaries, our keys are tuples, and we're just using, a single value to do it. And we can rewrite get cookies. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to kind of hurry this up a little bit. Get cookie is going to be exactly the same. I think I have the other one still. It's going to have the same function name. We don't want to change the function name. We want the code to work the same. And think about what's going to happen, and also think about the error case. What if the key is not in the site? Sorry, in the cookies. That was a problem last time. And we return the default. Otherwise, we're just going to return the value of the particular key. So if we don't find the tuple in the cookies dictionary, we give whatever the default is. But if we do find the tuple, then we return the value, or we do find that tuple, we return the value for that particular tuple. Again, that tuple is a key. So let's go back to, remember, we said this one is actually going to fail, but the default value is Arial, so it worked. Let me find an older one that actually worked. There, font pref. Font pref is in there. Or was it not in there? Oh, I forgot to provide a default. And the default is Arial. However, it's in there, so it returned the courier. And so what we did here is we took one version, we modified how we wanted to store the cookies, right? We wrote the same functions in two different ways. And from the user's perspective, whenever they call these functions, it's still the same because they're going to pass in 4 values to both functions exactly the same as they did in both cases. And when we used the implementation of the CSC 8A Image Library before, it was actually implemented in the beginning. It was actually implemented one way, and students started using it for the PAs. But then the writers, the instructors found a better way of doing it from the previous quarters. When they made that library, they actually found another way of writing the code that was more efficient. And they didn't change the interfaces, so we didn't change any of the programs that students wrote. They just changed how the functions worked. Internally, the implementation deals changed, but the libraries themselves were used exactly the same. And this is how we write libraries from the user perspective. We can change how things are implemented, but we leave the functions alone because then that breaks their programs. And as you become more experienced in computer science, you're going to be the ones writing these kinds of libraries. And let's see, there's other things we can do which we don't have time for. Nope, that's not it. That's going to be homework. There's another function in here we want to write. I'll provide the code for it, but you can figure it out on your own. But how would you, and I'm not going to do it because we're out of time, is how would you print out for both of these? In fact, there is a really fast way of doing it. How would you print out all of the keys? Actually, the second one is a little bit harder. This one's a little bit harder. How do you print all the sites? Just so this doesn't break, I'm going to return none. This one's actually pretty easy. As long as you know the site's in there. You can actually return the keys. Remember that method returns the keys? And if we run that, we pass in a site, and I forgot the cookies. And it uses this dictionary keys thing. So all we have to do to turn this a real list was we just convert it to a list. And now it returns an actual list. However, there could be a way of writing this, and there actually is an easier way or there's another way of writing this. And this one over here has to be fixed too, where you could loop through cookies and return the sites themselves using a couple of for loops. That's something you might want to think about doing in the future, but we're not going to worry about that today because we are way out of time.